Good evening. Welcome back to Kevin Toll Reads. So today I have a book review, The Night and the Music by Lawrence Block. This is a short story collection in the Matthew Scudder universe. I'm going to call this Matthew Scudder 18. I have this novella left and I'm done with Scudder. I'm excited to knock that long-term goal off, but I'm very kind of feeling a little apprehensive that it's going to come over because you put a lot of time and investment in longer series, and so, but I am glad. So let's talk about this before I get too off topic here. So this book was published in 2011. It's a collection of 11 shorter stories in the Scudder universe. Some of them kind of extensions of other stories or fit in and tie into other books, but I found these overall pretty good. I'm going to talk about a few of them, a handful that I really liked, and kind of give you the premise about them. There's no real spoilers to this video if you plan on reading this book. These stories cover different aspects of Scudder throughout the years, kind of, so to speak. You have stories where he is a PI, obviously, stories where he's kind of done with the PI and he's married to Elaine, stories where it took place where he wasn't married to Elaine and he was seeing Elaine on the side. He had stories where Anita and the boys and they were separated and he was living in the hotel. You have stories after he gets sobriety and an A. So a plethora of different kind of timestamps throughout the story's overarching arc of Matthew Scudder. So I found that I really enjoyed that. There was several stories that I really kind of connected with. One of them was The Candle for the Bag Lady. You have this story, Matt's drinking at this time, so it's early in his kind of arc. And so there's this neighborhood lady, street lady, that used to buy papers and sell them that didn't really need to make any money because she was selling them for what she bought them for, but she needed something to do, and she ends up being stabbed to death. And lo and behold, Scudder gets an inheritance from this lady that he didn't really know, just because in her will that she thought he was a good guy, and so he feels obligated trying to understand and what happened to her and why. I thought that was pretty interesting. You have The Merciful Angel of Death. This is a story around where there's this administrator for this AIDS hospice place who fears that there's this mysterious woman going around that might be killing some of the patients. And so he asked Matt to investigate, and lo and behold, this lady that they dubbed the Merciful Angel of Death isn't what she seems. And so I thought that was really cool. Batman's Helpers. This was an interesting one. It really kind of premises around Matt with some other characters doing kind of a copyright infringement enforcement of people selling Batman shirts that don't have that they copy from the screen printing materials back in the day, and they didn't have the copyright infringement logo, and people are trying to sell them on the street and outside on the streets into bodegas and that kind of thing. And so this company affiliated with Batman in DC is paying them to go around and enforce this infringement law, and so he gets paid like cash every day plus expenses, but he just doesn't have the heart for it. I thought that was pretty interesting. Let's Get Lost was another short story. It's a flashback story. Matt is a cop, so it takes place really early in his career, and he provides some odd advice to these players at a poker game, and he's sharing this with Elaine. It's interesting in the sense that he goes and investigates this poker game, and this one of the players ends up dead, and how he goes about both getting to the truth and conning these guys out of cash, so to speak, and the guys that he's on their side, and well, I think we should do this before we call the police. And it was interesting. You definitely get to see that Scudder over the years isn't a morally upstanding person, so to speak, and so I thought that was really interesting. And then the last story, you have One Last Night at Grogan's Mix Bar. It was the end story, and so it definitely has a really kind of good placement because you get to see that Kristen and Mick are still married. They go to Grogan's to close it down with Matt and Elaine. You get some little bitty tidbits here and there. At one point, they mentioned that Matt was the best man at Mick's wedding, which I thought that was interesting. But basically, Mick sold the saloon. This was the last night. They closed it down, and so there was a couple of different things in that was interesting. One excerpt from that story, they were talking about, well, aren't you gonna, lock it up? And he's like, oh, what do I care? And he goes and I think Elaine or Matt mentioned, like, at one time no one would cross you. And he's like, and Mick says, and this was really interesting, once that was true, now the lion is old and toothless and just wants to lay by the fire. And I thought that was interesting because it really kind of sets the mood of that story and the closure of this collection up really well. There was one other excerpt that I picked, and then I wanted to read an excerpt. The other excerpt that I picked up and just stuck with me is, I don't even remember the premise of it, but it was like, don't ask me, I'm not Catholic. And it just I don't know if it just caught me off guard or whatever, but I remember that and I wrote that down. But there is an excerpt here that I want to read to you, and I thought it was really interesting. This one in particular is in the story, I believe, Let's Get Lost. Yeah. And so it's basically closes out this short story, but I found it really interesting, and I want to share it with you. Funny how things work out. It wasn't too long after the poker game, and this was that poker game. It wasn't too long after the poker game that another incident precipitated my departure from the NYPD and from my marriage. Elaine and I lost track of each other and caught up with each other some years down the line, by which time I had found a way to live without drinking. So we got lost and found, and now we're married. Who would have guessed? My life's vastly different these days, but I can imagine being called in on just that sort of emergency. A man dead on a carpet, a knife in his chest, in the company of 4 poker players who only wish to disappear. As I said, my life's different, and I suppose I'm different myself, so I'd almost certainly handle it differently now. And what I'd probably do is call it in immediately and let the cops deal with it. Still, I always liked the way that this one worked out. I walked in on a cover-up, and what I did was cover up the cover-up. And in the process, I wound up coming to the truth, or an approximation of it at least. And it isn't that as much as you can expect to get. Isn't that enough? I thought that was really, really good writing. Not only for the story, but just in Scudder's mind, we get to see this. And I guess, again, I'm getting kind of sentimental because I'm getting close to the end of this, but I give this a solid 4. I have no dislikes here. I mean, these are small excerpts. This is a 230-page book. You got 11 short stories, so you can kind of do the math. These are short entries, but definitely some of these really stood out. And the last couple especially really stood out. So that's my review. The Night and the Music. I'm going to call this Book 18, the Matthew Scudder series by Lawrence Block. Gave it a 4.0. So I hope you're enjoying your evening and enjoying some good reading, and I will talk to you guys later. Thanks.